The autumn wind swept across the vast cornfields of Cedar Ridge, Kansas, carrying with it the scent of harvest and the promise of winter. It was 4:30 in the morning, and while most 17-year-olds were deep in sleep, Maya Brennan was already 2 hours into her day. She stood in the middle of her family's 100-acre farm, her worn work boots planted firmly in the rich soil she'd known since childhood, watching the sky transform from black to deep purple to the faintest suggestion of pink on the eastern horizon. The weight of the hay bale in her arms would have staggered most people her age, but Maya hefted it with practiced ease, her lean, wiry muscles moving with efficient grace beneath her faded work jacket. Years of physical labor had carved her body into something functional rather than decorative. Her hands calloused from endless mornings of fence mending and hay baling, her shoulders broad from carrying feed sacks, her core strong from the constant bending, lifting and hauling that farm life demanded. Her dark auburn hair, which might have been beautiful if she'd ever had time to care for it properly, was tied back in a practical ponytail that had already begun to escape its elastic band. Wisps of it caught the dying light of the day as she loaded the last bale onto the trailer, creating a momentary halo effect that she never noticed. She was too focused on calculating whether they had enough feed to last through the coming winter, whether the repair on the eastern fence would hold through the next storm, whether the pregnant mare in the barn would deliver safely. The barn itself was a monument to generations of Brennan farmers, its red paint faded to a dusty rose, its wooden beams bearing the carved initials of her grandfather, her father, and now, hidden in a corner where no one else would look, her own. The structure creaked and groaned with age, but it was solid, built to last by people who understood that some things were worth preserving. Inside, 23 head of cattle shifted restlessly, their breath creating small clouds in the cool morning air. The 3 horses nickered softly as Maya approached, recognizing her footsteps, knowing that breakfast was coming. She moved through her morning routine with the unconscious precision of someone who had performed these tasks thousands of times. First, the cattle, checking each one for signs of illness or injury, measuring out their feed, ensuring their water troughs were clean and full. Then the horses, each one greeting her with their own personality. Buttercup, the gentle mare who always nuzzled her pocket for the apple she knew Maya carried. Thunder, the temperamental stallion who only trusted Maya and her father. And Sage, the old gelding who had taught Maya to ride when she was barely 5 years old. The chickens came next, their indignant squawking at being disturbed, never failing to make Maya smile slightly. She scattered their feed with practiced throws, checking the nesting boxes for eggs, counting heads to ensure none had fallen prey to foxes or coyotes in the night. 27 chickens, 1 ornery rooster who charged at everyone except Maya, and 3 ducks who had shown up one day and decided to stay. By the time she finished her morning chores, the sun had fully risen, painting the cornfields gold and casting long shadows across the farmyard. She had 45 minutes to shower, change, grab something that resembled breakfast, and drive the 20 minutes to Cedar Ridge High School. It was a routine she'd perfected over the years, though it never got easier. To the students at Cedar Ridge High School, Maya was an outsider, a curiosity at best and a target at worst. They saw her arrive each morning in a battered 1998 Ford F-150 that coughed blue smoke and had more rust than red paint. They saw her walk through the gleaming hallways in clothes that were always clean but never fashionable. Jeans from the farm supply store, flannel shirts soft from hundreds of washings, boots that were practical rather than stylish. They smelled the faint aroma that clung to her no matter how much she scrubbed. Not unpleasant, really, just different. It was the smell of honest work, of fresh hay and leather, and the indefinable scent of earth and animals. To Maya, it was simply the smell of home. To them, it was a mark of her otherness, a sign that she didn't belong in their world of mall shopping trips. and Starbucks runs and carefully curated social media presence. They didn't know about the 4 a.m. wake-ups or the way her back ached by the time she sat down in first period. They didn't know that she often did her homework by lantern light in the barn while sitting up with a sick animal. They didn't know that the essays they complained about writing were composed in her head while she mucked stalls, refined while she repaired fences, and typed out in the precious hour before bed when her father thought she was sleeping. They certainly didn't know that she maintained a 4.0 GPA despite missing classes during calving season, harvest time, and whenever the farm demanded her presence more than school did. Her teachers knew. They saw the intelligence that blazed behind her quiet demeanor, the way she devoured books during lunch, the insightful questions she occasionally asked when she forgot to keep her head down. But her classmates only saw what they wanted to see. Someone they deemed beneath them, someone who served as a convenient target for their own insecurities and cruelties. Robert Brennan was not a man who spoke much about feelings or the past, but Maya knew his history in the way she knew the rhythm of the seasons, through observation, through the spaces between words, through the ghosts that sometimes flickered across his weathered face. He was 47 years old but looked older, carved by wind and sun and losses that went bone deep. His hands were massive, scarred things that could gentle a spooked horse or snap a man's arm with equal ease. He'd grown up on this same farm, the third generation of Brennans to work this land. But at 18, with the restlessness that sometimes grips young men who've known only one place, he'd joined the army. Not just the army, the Rangers. He'd wanted to test himself against something harder than drought and frost, wanted to see if the strength that farm life had given him could translate to other kinds of survival. 3 tours in Afghanistan had answered that question and asked 1,000 others he still couldn't voice. Maya had been 9 when he'd finally come home for good, discharged with honors and scars both visible and hidden. She remembered the stranger who'd stood in their kitchen, looking like her father, but carrying himself differently, coiled, watchful, ready for threats that would never come in rural Kansas. Her mother, Sarah, had been his anchor then. A nurse at the county hospital, she'd had her own kind of strength. The kind that could ease pain with a touch, that could find humor in darkness, that could love fiercely enough to call a wounded warrior back to himself. She'd given Robert purpose again, reminded him that there were battles worth fighting that didn't involve bullets and bombs. Together, they'd built something good on that farm, a life, a family, a future. Then, the cancer came. It started as fatigue that Sarah brushed off as too many double shifts. Then weight loss she attributed to stress. By the time they found the tumors, they'd spread from her pancreas to her liver to her lungs, an invasion force that all of Robert's combat skills couldn't fight. She'd lived 8 months from diagnosis to the end, each day a lesson in courage that Maya still carried with her. Maya had been 11 when her mother died, old enough to understand death, but too young to process it fully. She remembered the funeral, the whole town turning out, the mountains of casseroles that appeared on their doorstep. She remembered her father standing at the graveside like a statue, his dress uniform impeccable, his face carved from stone. She remembered the flag they'd given him, not for his service, but for hers, because Sarah had been a different kind of hero. After that, Robert had poured himself into 2 things, the farm and Maya. The farm was familiar, demanding enough to exhaust him into dreamless sleep. But Maya was more complicated. She looked like her mother, the same auburn hair, the same green eyes that could see through pretense to truth. Every day she grew more into Sarah's image, and Robert didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. He'd raised her with a peculiar mix of tenderness and toughness, understanding instinctively that the world would not be kind to a motherless girl who didn't fit its expectations. He taught her the practical things first, how to read the weather in cloud formations, how to tell when an animal was sick before symptoms showed, how to manage money when there was never enough of it. But he also taught her harder lessons, the kind he'd learned in places where weakness meant death. It started small. When she was 12 and came home crying because kids at school had called her barn girl and held their noses when she walked by, Robert had taken her out to the old storage building behind the house. Inside, he'd cleared a space and hung a heavy bag. "Hit it," he'd said. "Dad, I don't hit it." She'd thrown a clumsy punch that barely moved the bag and hurt her hand. Robert had nodded, then shown her how to make a proper fist, how to rotate her hips, how to put her whole body behind the strike. They'd spent an hour there, and when they were done, Maya's knuckles were raw and her arms ached, but something had shifted in her eyes. "I'm not teaching you to hurt people," Robert had said as they walked back to the house. "I'm teaching you to hurt them if they try to hurt you first. There's a difference. Your mother would want you to be kind, but she'd also want you to be safe." Over the years, that storage building became something more. Robert had invested what little extra money they had into equipment: mats for grappling, a speed bag, a double-end bag, pull-up bars, free weights. He'd called in favors from his army buddies, men who'd gone on to become trainers, fighters, coaches. They'd come to the farm for a weekend here and there, teaching Maya things that most teenage girls never learned: how to slip a punch, how to shoot for a takedown, how to apply a chokehold that could render someone unconscious in seconds. Marcus Washington had been the most influential, a former Delta Force operator who'd transitioned to training professional MMA fighters in Kansas City. He'd taken one look at Maya when she was 14 and seen something special. "She's got it," he'd told Robert after their first training session. "The instinct. Some people, you put them in a fight and they freeze or flail. Others, they become something else. She's got that switch. Question is whether you want to flip it." Robert had watched his daughter execute a perfect armbar on a man twice her size, her face calm and focused, and made his decision. "She needs to be ready for whatever comes. I couldn't protect her mother from the cancer, but I can damn sure protect her from people." By the time Maya turned 17, she could execute techniques that would impress professional fighters. Her days started with a 5-mile run through the corn rows before her farm chores. Lunch breaks at school were spent doing bodyweight exercises in hidden corners of the campus. Evenings, after homework and dinner, were for the real training: 2 to 3 hours of bag work, grappling practice with her father, strength training and flexibility work. Her body had transformed, though she hid it under loose clothing. Beneath the flannel and denim was a physique that spoke of functional strength, not the sculpted aesthetic of Instagram fitness models, but the dense, practical muscle of someone who used their body as a tool. Her hands were weapons now, capable of delivering knockout power despite her size. Her ground game was exceptional, years of wrestling cattle and training with larger opponents, having taught her how to use leverage and technique to overcome size disadvantages. But more than the physical skills, Robert had given her the warrior's mind. She could assess threats instantly, reading body language and positioning like others read text. She could control her breathing and heart rate under stress, a skill that served her well during tests as much as sparring sessions. She could endure pain and exhaustion that would break most people, having learned that the body could always go further than the mind believed. Her father's mantra had become her own: "Strength isn't about showing off, Maya. It's about being ready when readiness matters." The irony was that she'd never needed these skills. Not really. A few times boys had gotten too aggressive at school dances before she'd stopped attending them. Once a drunk man at the county fair had grabbed her arm, only to find himself on his knees gasping when she'd applied a simple wrist lock. But mostly, her training remained hidden, a secret she carried like others carried concealed weapons, present but invisible, insurance against a threat that might never come. At Cedar Ridge High School, the social hierarchy was as rigid and merciless as any caste system. It was a medium-sized school, just under 800 students, large enough for distinct social groups, but small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. The building itself was only 10 years old, built with money from a tech company that had briefly considered Cedar Ridge for a headquarters before choosing somewhere with better tax breaks. It gleamed with glass and steel, a modern monument to the town's aspirations, sitting incongruously among the endless fields of corn and soybeans. At the apex of this hierarchy sat Victoria Sinclair, and she ruled with the calculated cruelty of someone who understood power intuitively. At 17, she was what every girl in school either wanted to be or wanted to be with. 5'8", naturally blonde with professionally maintained highlights, possessing the kind of effortless beauty that seemed unfair to those who struggled with acne and awkwardness. Her body was perfect in the way that money could ensure: personal trainer perfect, nutritionist perfect, dermatologist perfect. But Victoria's true power didn't come from her looks. It came from her father, Richard Sinclair, who owned Sinclair Development Group, the largest commercial real estate company in 3 counties. He'd transformed Cedar Ridge from a dying farm town to a thriving suburb of Kansas City, bringing in shopping centers, restaurants, and housing developments that attracted wealthy families looking for authentic Midwest living with all the modern conveniences. The Sinclairs lived in a 7,000-square-foot house on the edge of town, complete with a pool, tennis court, and a view of the valley that had once been the Miller family farm before Richard bought them out. Victoria had been raised to understand that money was power, but influence was everything. Her Instagram account had 12,000 followers, carefully curated with photos that suggested a life of casual perfection. Every post was calculated. The right lighting, the right caption, the right tags to maximize engagement. She turned herself into a brand before she turned 17, and she managed that brand with the ruthlessness of a Fortune 500 CEO. Her inner circle was small and carefully chosen. Madison Chen was her lieutenant, a beautiful girl whose surgeon mother and banker father had moved from Chicago seeking that authentic Midwest experience. Madison was smart enough to be truly dangerous, capable of destroying someone with rumors that contained just enough truth to be believed. She was the one who managed the anonymous gossip page that terrorized the school, though no one could prove it. Ashley Rodriguez completed the Trinity, her father being the school district's superintendent. She had access to information others didn't, knew which teachers were having affairs, which students were failing, who was in therapy or on medication. She weaponized this knowledge with surgical precision, always maintaining plausible deniability, always keeping her hands clean while others bled from wounds she'd inflicted. And then there was Connor McKnight, Victoria's boyfriend and the crown prince to her queen. 6'3", 220 pounds of athletic perfection. He was the quarterback who'd led Cedar Ridge to its first state championship in 20 years. His father was the town's mayor, his mother a successful real estate agent who worked exclusively with Victoria's father. Connor and Victoria had been together since sophomore year. Their relationship less romance than political alliance, each enhancing the other's power. Connor wasn't naturally cruel, not like Victoria. He was more like a weapon she wielded, his size and status making him the enforcer of her will. When Victoria decided someone needed to be put in their place, Connor was there to loom, to intimidate, to make it clear that resistance would have consequences. He did it because it was expected, because it was easier than standing up to Victoria, because he'd been raised to believe that this was simply how the world worked. The strong dominated the weak. The harassment of Maya had started almost immediately when she'd entered high school. Victoria had taken one look at this quiet farm girl with her wrong clothes and wrong smell, and decided she represented everything that Cedar Ridge was trying to leave behind. Maya was the past. Victoria was the future, and the future had no room for reminders of what the town used to be. It began with the small cruelties that could be dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. Victoria would walk past Maya in the hallway and comment to Madison just loud enough to be heard, "God, did someone bring a cow inside?" Madison would laugh, that tinkling sound that drew attention, ensuring everyone noticed Maya and started sniffing the air theatrically. Then came the social media campaign, photos of Maya taken without her knowledge, bending over to pick up books, revealing the holes in her jeans, eating alone at lunch, emphasized with captions about feeding time at the zoo, walking to her truck after school, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, tagged with number, farm life number, not cute number, why live like this? Ashley's contribution was more insidious. She spread rumors with the skill of a professional propagandist. Maya's father was a drunk. He wasn't. He hadn't touched alcohol since Sarah died. Maya's family was on welfare. They weren't. They struggled, but were too proud for assistance. Maya had diseases from the animals. She didn't. She was healthier than most of her classmates. Each rumor was crafted to be just believable enough, just cruel enough to stick. The teachers saw, but did nothing substantial. A few sympathetic looks, an occasional knock it off when things got too obvious, but nothing that would actually stop it. The principal, Dr. Harrison, was 3 years from retirement and had no interest in taking on Richard Sinclair's daughter. The school board was populated with Victoria's parents' friends. The system was rigged, and everyone knew it. Maya endured it all, with a stoicism that only seemed to enrage Victoria more. She wanted tears, wanted breakdowns, wanted visible proof of her power, but Maya gave her nothing. She walked through the halls with her eyes forward, sat alone with her books, submitted her assignments on time, and never ever reacted to the provocations. Inside, though, Maya was building something. Every insult became fuel. Every accidental shoulder check in the hallway became another reason to train harder. Every cruel post online became another mile to run, another hour on the heavy bag, another round of grappling that left her muscles screaming. She was transforming her humiliation into something else, something dangerous, though no one could see it happening. Her father saw, though. He saw the way she attacked the heavy bag with barely controlled violence. He saw how her technique got sharper, more precise, more devastating. He saw the look in her eyes changing from hurt to determination to something harder. "You're getting angry," he said one night after a particularly intense training session. "Shouldn't I be?" Maya asked, unwrapping her hands. Her knuckles were raw despite the wraps, blood seeping through the white cloth. Anger's useful if you control it, dangerous if it controls you. Robert studied his daughter, seeing Sarah in her face but something else in her eyes. Something that came from him, from the places he'd been, the things he'd done. They getting worse at school? Maya shrugged, but Robert knew his daughter. He'd seen the posts online. He might be a farmer, but he wasn't ignorant. He'd wanted to storm into that school, to find Richard Sinclair and explain what happened to men who let their children torment others. But he knew that would only make things worse for Maya. "There's going to come a moment," he said carefully, "when you'll have to decide whether to endure or to act. When that moment comes, you'll know. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. But remember, once you show people what you really are, you can never take it back." Maya nodded, understanding. She'd been hiding her true self for so long that sometimes she forgot it herself. The quiet farm girl was real, but so was the warrior her father had trained. The question was, which one would ultimately define her? The breaking point came on an unseasonably warm Thursday in late October. The temperature had climbed into the 70s, unusual for Kansas at that time of year, making everyone restless and irritable. Maya had stayed after school to use the library, needing to finish a research paper on the economic impact of agricultural consolidation, a topic she knew intimately from watching small farms around them get bought out by corporate operations. She was one of the top students in her grade, though few knew it because she never drew attention to herself. Her teachers knew. Ms. Chen in AP English had tried to convince her to apply to Ivy League schools. Mr. Rodriguez in AP History had written her a recommendation letter for a full scholarship to the state university. But Maya kept her academic success as hidden as her fighting skills, another secret that would only make her more of a target. The library was nearly empty when she finally packed up her things. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, gave her a sympathetic smile. She was one of the few adults at school who treated Maya with genuine kindness, perhaps because she'd grown up on a farm herself before marrying a banker and moving to town. "Drive safe, dear," Mrs. Patterson said. "Radio says there might be storms coming in tonight." Maya thanked her and headed out to the parking lot. The sun was low on the horizon, painting everything golden, and for a moment she allowed herself to appreciate the beauty of it. Then she saw them. They were arranged like predators around prey. Victoria leaning against Maya's truck, Madison and Ashley flanking her, Connor and 3 other football players forming a loose semicircle that cut off any escape route. Derek Thompson was there, Connor's best friend and the team's linebacker, along with Jake Morrison and Tyler Banks, both seniors who lived for Connor's approval. Maya's mind immediately went into assessment mode, a habit drilled into her by years of training. 7 opponents, open ground with no cover, her truck blocked in by Connor's lifted Silverado and Derek's Mustang. No teachers visible, no security cameras covering this part of the lot. They'd planned this. She could run, but that would mean leaving her truck, and she needed it to get home. Her father would be expecting her to help with evening chores. The pregnant mare was due any day, and Maya was worried about complications. Running would also give Victoria what she wanted, proof of fear, evidence of power. So Maya walked forward, her gait steady, her breathing controlled. Her backpack was heavy with books, making it both a hindrance and a potential weapon. She'd already identified 3 ways to use it if necessary. "Well, look what finally crawled out of the library," Victoria said, her voice carrying that honey-sweet tone that meant trouble. She was wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Maya's truck was worth. Her makeup was perfect despite the long day, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Trying to pretend you're one of us, farm girl? Studying won't change what you are." Maya stopped just outside of striking distance, her weight balanced, ready to move in any direction. "I need to get home," she said, her voice calm and level. "Move away from my truck." Victoria laughed, the sound echoing across the empty parking lot. "She needs to get home, everyone. Probably has to milk the cows. Or is it the pigs tonight? I can never keep track of which animals you service." The boys laughed, an ugly sound that made Maya's jaw clench. She forced herself to relax, to keep her hands loose at her sides. Connor had moved closer, she noticed, trying to get into her blind spot. Amateur move. She shifted slightly, keeping everyone in view. "What's the matter?" Madison chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. "You look tense. Is it because you know you don't belong here? This is a school for people, not animals." "Though sometimes it's hard to tell the difference with her," Ashley added, wrinkling her nose. "That smell. How do you stand it? Do you even notice anymore, or have you just given up trying to be human?" Maya felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but underneath it was something else, a cold calculation. She could see how this would play out. They'd escalate until she either broke down or tried to push past them. Then they'd claim she started it, that they were just talking and she got physical. With 7 witnesses against 1, she'd be the one suspended, maybe expelled. But there was something different in the air tonight, a charge like the electricity before a storm. Victoria's eyes held a manic gleam, and Maya realized with sudden clarity that this wasn't going to end with just words. Not tonight. "Your clothes!" Madison said suddenly, stepping forward. "They literally smell like manure. It's disgusting. You're disgusting." "Maybe we're doing the school a public service," Victoria said, her smile widening. "Maybe those rags need to come off. For hygiene reasons." Maya's body tensed. This was escalating faster than she'd expected. "Don't," she said, her voice dropping to a lower register, the one her father used when he was deadly serious. Victoria's eyes flashed with triumph. She'd finally gotten a reaction. "Or what?" She stepped forward, close enough that Maya could smell her expensive perfume. "What's farm trash going to do about it?" "Victoria," Connor said, and there was something in his voice, not quite concern but uncertainty. "Maybe we should, shut up," Victoria snapped without looking at him. Her eyes never left Maya's. "I'm so tired of seeing her walk around here like she belongs, like she's as good as us." She reached out suddenly, her manicured fingers grabbing the collar of Maya's flannel shirt. "This pathetic thing needs to go." Maya's reaction was instantaneous and instinctive. Her hand shot up, gripping Victoria's wrist with enough force to make the blonde gasp. "Let go." For a moment, they stood frozen, Victoria's eyes wide with shock at the strength in Maya's grip. Then her face flushed with rage. "Connor!" she said, her voice sharp with command. "She's hurting me!" Connor moved immediately, conditioned to obey. He grabbed Maya's arms from behind, pinning them to her sides. Derek moved in too, ready to help if needed. Maya struggled, but Connor's football-trained strength and leverage advantage held her in place. "You shouldn't have done that," Victoria hissed, rubbing her wrist theatrically, though Maya knew she hadn't gripped hard enough to really hurt. "Now you're going to learn what happens when trash doesn't know its place." She grabbed Maya's shirt again, yanking hard. The old flannel, worn soft and thin from countless washings, tore with a sound like ripping paper. The sound seemed to echo across the parking lot, and for a moment, everyone froze. Then Victoria smiled and pulled again, harder this time. The shirt came apart in her hands, buttons popping off and scattering across the asphalt. Maya struggled harder against Connor's grip, but he held firm, his breath hot against her ear. "Stop fighting," he growled. "You're making it worse." Victoria wasn't done. The destruction of the shirt had awakened something cruel and primal in her. She grabbed at the remains, tearing strips away, until Maya was left in just her sports bra, her torso exposed to the cooling evening air, and, more importantly, to their eyes. "Oh my God," Madison gasped, but it wasn't entirely mockery. There was something else in her voice. Surprise, maybe even a touch of fear. Maya's body was not what they'd expected. Farm work and years of intensive training had sculpted her into something formidable. Her abs were defined, her shoulders capped with muscle, her arms showing the kind of definition that spoke of serious strength. Scars marked her skin here and there, from barbed wire, from accidents with tools, from training sessions that had gone too hard. She looked like what she was, a fighter. "Jesus," Jake muttered. "She's ripped." "She's a freak," Victoria said quickly, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Look at her, built like a boy. All that farm work turned you into some kind of mutant, didn't it?" But the dynamic had shifted slightly. The boys were looking at Maya differently now, not with desire, but with a kind of wary respect. Connor's grip had loosened slightly, perhaps unconsciously. Ashley, trying to support Victoria, grabbed at Maya's jeans. "These are practically falling apart anyway," she said, finding a small tear near the knee. "Probably from a thrift store. Can your daddy not afford real clothes?" She pulled at the tear, widening it, the sound of ripping denim joining the symphony of humiliation. Madison joined in, grabbing the other leg, and together they reduced Maya's jeans to tatters while she fought against Connor's hold. The humiliation burned through Maya like acid, hot and corrosive. She could feel tears threatening, her body shaking with a combination of rage and shame. Students had begun to gather at the edges of the parking lot, phones out, recording everything. She could hear their whispers, their laughs, their gasps. But beneath the humiliation, something else was building. The switch Marcus had talked about, the one that turned a normal person into something else. Maya felt it clicking into place, felt her mind go quiet and cold. Her body stopped struggling, going completely still in Connor's arms. Connor, thinking she'd given up, thinking she was beaten, relaxed his grip. It was all she needed. Maya dropped her weight suddenly, a technique her father had drilled into her hundreds of times. As Connor tried to adjust, she twisted, using his own momentum against him. Her elbow found his solar plexus with surgical precision, driving the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, gasping, she spun to face the others. Derek came at her, throwing a wild haymaker that telegraphed his intentions from a mile away. Maya slipped it easily, the punch whistling past her ear, and countered with a liver shot that dropped him to his knees. He hit the asphalt hard, his face going pale as he fought not to vomit. Jake and Tyler looked at each other, then at Maya standing there in her torn clothes, her stance perfect, her eyes cold as winter frost, and decided they wanted no part of this. They backed away, hands up in surrender. "You bitch!" Victoria screamed, her perfect composure finally cracking. You're going to pay for ooh." "No!" Maya said, and her voice cut through Victoria's tirade like a blade. "I'm done paying, done being your victim, done pretending I'm less than you, just because my family works for a living instead of exploiting others." She took a step forward, and Victoria actually backed up, fear flickering in her eyes. "The Harvest Festival is in 2 weeks. There's a fighting competition, mixed martial arts. I'll be entering." She looked at Connor, who was still on one knee, struggling to breathe. "Make sure he enters too." Victoria laughed, but it was shaky, uncertain. "You're insane if you think—" "When I win," Maya continued as if Victoria hadn't spoken, "you're going to apologize. Not just to me, but to everyone you've tormented in this school. Emily Patterson, who you drove to attempt suicide last year. Marcus Webb, who you outed before he was ready. Jennifer Liu, who transferred schools because of your harassment. All of them." She picked up her backpack, holding the remains of her shirt closed with one hand, her dignity intact despite everything. "Or," she said, looking directly at Victoria, "everyone will know that your boyfriend, the big strong football star, got beaten by farm trash. Your choice." She walked to her truck, aware of dozens of eyes on her, of phones still recording. Someone had pulled Connor's truck out of the way. She saw a few football players she'd always thought were decent standing by it, looking ashamed. She climbed into her cab, started the engine that coughed and protested before catching, and drove away with her head high. The drive home was a blur. Her hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline and emotion coursing through her system. She'd crossed a line, revealed something she'd kept hidden for years. There was no going back now. She pulled into the farm's long gravel driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Her father was standing on the porch, and she knew immediately that he'd already heard. News traveled fast in Cedar Ridge, and someone had clearly called him. Robert took one look at her, the torn clothes, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and nodded slowly. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you cleaned up, then you can tell me everything." Maya told him the whole story as she helped him with the evening chores. She spoke steadily, without emotion, relating the facts as she would a mission report. Robert listened in silence, his face giving nothing away, though she saw his knuckles whiten when she described the assault. When she finished, they stood together in the barn, the familiar sounds and smells wrapping around them like a comfort blanket. Thunder nickered softly from his stall, sensing their mood. 2 weeks, Robert said finally. "That's not much time." I know. Connor's got 60, 70 pounds on you. He's strong, he's athletic, he's not trained, but sometimes raw physical advantages matter. I know. Robert turned to look at his daughter. You sure you want to do this? Once it starts, you can't take it back. Win or lose, everyone will know what you are. Maya met his eyes steadily. I'm tired of hiding, Dad. Tired of being ashamed of who we are, what we do. We feed people, we work honest. We've got nothing to be ashamed of. Robert was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. Marcus? It's Robert. Yeah, I know what time it is. Listen, I need a favor, a big one. Can you clear your schedule for the next 2 weeks? The next 14 days transformed Maya's already intense training into something that would have qualified as torture in some circles. Marcus arrived the next day, taking vacation time from his gym to personally oversee her preparation. He brought with him 2 other trainers, Luis, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt who'd competed at the highest levels, and Hannah, a former professional female fighter who'd retired undefeated. She's got the skills, Marcus said after the first assessment. But skills don't mean shit if you can't perform under pressure. We're going to put her through hell, Robert. You sure you're okay with that? Robert watched his daughter working with Luis, her movements fluid and precise, despite the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. She's already been through hell. You're just going to teach her to fight back. The schedule was brutal. Maya woke at 3:30 a.m. now, getting in a 10-mile run before her farm chores. The run wasn't just cardio. Marcus had her wearing a weighted vest, running intervals through the corn rows, up hills, through the creek that cut across their property. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she never stopped. After chores and a protein-heavy breakfast, while she should have been in school, she trained technique with Luis. He was a perfectionist, making her drill the same moves hundreds of times until they were encoded in her muscle memory. You don't rise to the occasion in a fight, he said in his accented English. You sink to your level of training, so we make your training perfect. They worked everything: takedowns, takedown defense, guard passes, submissions, escapes. Luis had her practice against Hannah, who, despite being only 20 pounds heavier than Maya, provided a challenge with her professional experience. Hannah didn't hold back, submitting Maya repeatedly, showing her every weakness in her game. You're good for someone who learned in a barn, Hannah said after a particularly grueling session, but good isn't enough. You need to be exceptional. Afternoons were for striking with Marcus. He'd set up a full boxing ring in the barn, complete with ropes and corner pads. They worked combinations until Maya's arms felt like lead, footwork until her calves cramped, defense until she could slip punches in her sleep. Connor's going to come at you like a bull, Marcus said, holding pads for her to hit. Big, aggressive, trying to use his size. You need to be water, flow around him, make him miss, make him pay. Every time he throws and misses, he gets tired. Every time you land clean, he gets hurt. It's a math problem. You make him subtract faster than you do. Evenings were for strength and conditioning with Robert. He'd designed a program specifically for her needs: explosive power for takedowns, grip strength for submissions, core stability for everything. They used what they had: hay bales for carries, tractor tires for flips, chains for resistance work. It was old-school, brutal training that built the kind of functional strength no gym could replicate. Maya's school attendance became sporadic at best. She showed up for tests, turned in assignments, maintained her grades, but otherwise she was a ghost. The administration should have intervened, but word had gotten out about what had happened in the parking lot. Videos were circulating, despite Madison's best efforts to have them deleted. The narrative was shifting. Dr. Harrison called Robert once, threatening truancy charges. Robert's response was simple. My daughter was assaulted on school property in view of security cameras you claim don't work. Multiple students witnessed it. No one was punished. You want to talk about lawyers? Let's talk." The call ended quickly after that. Victoria tried to maintain control of the narrative. She posted constantly about how Maya had attacked Connor and Derek, how she was dangerous and unstable. But fewer people were buying it. The videos showed the truth. Maya defending herself after being assaulted, after having her clothes literally torn from her body. Connor, for his part, threw himself into training. Victoria had arranged for him to work with a former UFC fighter named Brad, who ran a gym in Kansas City. Connor had natural athleticism and genuine strength, and Brad was teaching him the basics quickly, but basics were all he had time for. "He's training 4 hours a day," one of Connor's teammates told another student, who told another, until it reached Maya through the strange telegraph of high school gossip. "He's obsessed. Says he can't let a girl beat him." Maya heard this while hanging from a pull-up bar, Hannah standing on a box beside her, randomly hitting her in the stomach to train her to maintain grip under distress. She'd smiled grimly and pulled herself up for another rep. The town was buzzing with anticipation. The Harvest Festival fighting competition had always been popular, but this year it had taken on epic proportions. Tickets sold out for the first time in its history. People were taking sides, making bets, arguing in the diner and the feed store about who would win. Most assumed Connor would destroy Maya. He was bigger, stronger, male. These things mattered, they said. But a small contingent, mostly people who'd known Robert and remembered his service, who'd seen Maya working the farm since she was tiny, who understood what kind of strength that life built. They quietly put their money on the farm girl. 3 days before the fight, Maya was doing her evening chores when she found her father in Thunder's stall, talking quietly to the stallion. She stopped, listening. "Sarah would be proud," he was saying. "She always said Maya had her spirit, but she's got something from me too, something I hoped she'd never need." He paused, stroking Thunder's neck. "I couldn't protect her mother, couldn't fight that battle, but this one she can win." Maya backed away silently, not wanting to intrude, but her father's words stayed with her, adding fuel to the fire that had been building for 2 weeks. The night before the festival, Maya couldn't sleep. She went to the barn, where her makeshift gym waited. The heavy bag hung there, still swaying slightly from the evening's work. She touched it gently, almost reverently. This was about more than a fight, she realized. It was about every kid who'd been told they weren't enough. Every person who'd been mocked for how they lived, how they dressed, how they survived. It was about her mother, who'd faced death with dignity. It was about her father, who'd come back from war and found peace in the soil. It was about the farm itself, this piece of land that had sustained her family for generations. She hit the bag once, a perfect cross that sent it spinning. Tomorrow, she'd step into a ring in front of the whole town. Tomorrow, she'd show them all what farm trash could do. The morning of the festival dawned clear and cold. Maya did her chores as always, finding comfort in the routine. The animals didn't care about the fight, about social hierarchies or viral videos. They just wanted their breakfast. "You ready?" Robert asked as they worked side by side, mucking stalls. "As ready as I can be?" "That's all anyone can ask." He paused, leaning on his pitchfork. "Your mother would be proud of you, not for fighting, for standing up. There's a difference." Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Marcus, Luis, and Hannah arrived at noon, turning the farmhouse into a command center. They went over strategy one more time, drilling key sequences into Maya's mind. "He's going to come out aggressive," Marcus said, using salt shakers on the kitchen table to demonstrate positioning. "Let him. Weather the storm. He'll gas himself out if you make him work. Then you take over." "Watch for the takedown," Luis added. "He's been training it, but his technique is shit. If he shoots, sprawl and spin. Take his back if you can. And remember," Hannah said, putting a hand on Maya's shoulder, "you've been training for this your whole life. He's been training for 2 weeks. Trust your preparation." They drove to the festival in a convoy, Maya and Robert in the truck, the trainers following. The fairgrounds were packed, cars parked in every available space and overflowing into the neighboring fields. The festival itself was in full swing. Carnival rides, food vendors, craft booths, live music. But everyone knew the real attraction was the fight. The community center had been transformed into an arena. The regulation ring stood in the center, surrounded by bleachers that were already filling up 3 hours before Maya's fight. Preliminary matches were underway, but they felt like opening acts before the main event. Maya weighed in at exactly 130 pounds, her body fat percentage lower than it had ever been. Connor weighed in at 218 pounds, having cut weight to make the heavyweight limit. He looked drawn, dehydrated from the cut, but still massive compared to Maya. They didn't speak during the weigh-in, but their eyes met across the scale. Connor's held anger, embarrassment, determination. Maya's were calm, focused, ready. The preliminary fights passed in a blur. Maya watched from the warm-up area, staying loose, visualizing her game plan. She could hear the crowd growing, feel the energy building. Hannah wrapped her hands with practiced efficiency, while Marcus ran her through combinations on pads one more time. "Remember," Robert said, kneeling in front of her, "this isn't about them. It's not about proving anything to anyone but yourself. You know who you are. You know what you can do. Go show them." Finally, it was time. Connor entered first to a massive roar from the crowd. The football team was there in force, chanting his name. He wore expensive fight shorts with his football number on them, his muscle torso gleaming under the lights. He shadow-boxed as he walked, throwing combinations that looked powerful but telegraphed. Victoria was ringside in a designer dress, live streaming everything, narrating to her followers about how her boyfriend was about to destroy the psycho farm girl. Then Maya's music hit. Not some pump-up anthem, but Johnny Cash's "God's Gonna Cut You Down," her father's choice. She walked out in simple black shorts and a black sports bra, her hands wrapped, her face calm. The crowd's reaction was mixed, but substantial. Cheers from unexpected quarters, boos from Victoria's section, but mostly a kind of awed curiosity. She looked smaller than ever next to Connor in the ring, David to his Goliath. But those who looked closer saw the definition in her muscles, the balance in her stance, the cold focus in her eyes. The referee, James Torres, was a former professional fighter who'd retired to Cedar Ridge to open a gym. He'd seen enough fights to know a mismatch when he saw one, but something about Maya's demeanor made him reassess. 3 rounds, 5 minutes each, he said, calling them to the center. "Protect yourself at all times. Follow my commands immediately. No strikes to the back of the head, no eye gouging, no biting, no strikes to the groin. If you want to touch gloves, do it now." Connor sneered, raising his gloves perfunctorily. Maya met them firmly, her eyes never leaving his. "Ready?" Torres asked Connor, who nodded aggressively. "Ready?" he asked Maya, who simply nodded. "Fight!" Connor charged immediately, exactly as Marcus had predicted. He threw a massive overhand right that would have ended the fight if it connected. But Maya wasn't there. She'd slipped to the outside, the punch whistling past her ear. Before Connor could reset, she was on him. A quick jab to the nose that snapped his head back, a leg kick that made him stumble, then out of range before he could counter. The crowd gasped. First blood was Maya's. Connor touched his nose, saw red on his glove, and his face contorted with rage. He charged again, throwing wild combinations, trying to corner Maya against the ropes, but she moved like smoke, always just out of reach, occasionally firing back with precise counters that found their mark. A straight right that split his lip, a body shot that made him grunt, another leg kick to the same spot, causing him to limp slightly. She was taking him apart, piece by piece. "Stop running!" Victoria screamed from ringside. "Fight him!" But Maya wasn't running. She was hunting. Every movement was calculated to make Connor work, to make him chase, to make him exhaust himself. And it was working. 2 minutes into the round, he was already breathing hard, his charges becoming slower, more predictable. That's when Maya really went to work. She started standing her ground, slipping Connor's punches by millimeters and countering with devastating precision. A slip to the right, left hook to the liver, duck under a wild swing, uppercut to the solar plexus, pivot away from a grab attempt, knee to the ribs. Connor tried to grab her to use his size advantage, but her takedown defense was perfect. She sprawled, she circled, she framed with her forearms. When he overcommitted to a double leg attempt, she sprawled hard, spun to his back, and locked in a rear naked choke before he knew what was happening. The crowd erupted. Connor was on his knees, Maya on his back, her arms wrapped around his neck in textbook position. His face turned red, then purple. He thrashed, trying to shake her off, but she had her hooks in, her body attached to his like a parasite. But Maya released the choke before Connor went out. She pushed off him, returning to her feet, leaving him gasping on his hands and knees. The message was clear. She could have ended it, but chose not to. "Get up," she said loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I'm not done with you yet." Connor struggled to his feet, his confidence shattered. The bell rang for the end of round 1. Connor's corner was frantic. The football coach was shouting instructions. Brad, the trainer, was trying to give technical advice. Victoria was screaming about embarrassment. Connor sat on his stool, gasping, his face already swelling from Maya's strikes. In Maya's corner, Marcus was calm. "Beautiful work. He's broken already. Now we just take him apart." He gave her water, wiped her face. She wasn't even breathing hard. "How does it feel?" Robert asked quietly. Maya looked across the ring at Connor, then at Victoria, then at the crowd that had tormented her for years. "Like justice," she said. Round 2 began with Connor desperate. He knew he was losing, knew he was being humiliated. He abandoned any pretense of technique, just trying to land one big shot that would save his pride. But Maya was in full flow now, her movement beautiful in its efficiency. She started targeting specific areas with surgical precision. 3 leg kicks to the exact same spot on Connor's thigh until he could barely put weight on that leg. Body shots to the same floating rib until she felt it give. Jabs that repeatedly found the same spot on his already swollen eye. When Connor shot for another desperate takedown, Maya sprawled, spun, and this time took mount position. The ground was where the size difference should have mattered most, but technique trumped size. She maintained position perfectly, raining down precise strikes while Connor flailed helplessly beneath her. The referee was watching closely, ready to stop it, but Maya was careful. She wasn't trying to knock Connor out. She was making a point. Every strike was measured, designed to hurt, but not incapacitate, to humiliate, but not permanently damage. With 30 seconds left in the round, she transitioned to an armbar. It was beautiful. A textbook transition that Luis would have been proud of. Connor's arm was extended, Maya's hips were high, the braking pressure clearly applied. Connor screamed, tapping frantically. But there was no submission in this exhibition match. It would go the full 3 rounds or end in knockout. Maya held the position for a moment, letting everyone see that she could break his arm if she chose, then released it and stood up. Connor rolled away, clutching his arm, tears streaming down his face. The bell rang for the end of round 2. "Stop the fight!" Victoria was screaming at the referee. "She's trying to kill him." But Torres had seen enough fights to know the difference between dominance and danger. Maya was in complete control, showing more restraint than most professional fighters would have. The 3rd round was a formality. Connor came out defeated, going through the motions. He threw weak punches that Maya didn't even need to dodge. She could have stood there and let him hit her and it wouldn't have mattered. Instead, she decided to end it with artistry. She threw a combination that Marcus had taught her, one that required perfect timing and distance management. Jab to measure, cross to stun, lead uppercut to lift the chin, rear high kick to finish. Each strike flowed into the next like a violent ballet. The kick landed flush on Connor's jaw. His eyes rolled back, his legs gave out, and he crashed to the canvas unconscious. The crowd exploded, half in celebration, half in shock. Torres didn't even count. He waved the fight off immediately, kneeling to check on Connor. The medical team rushed in, and after a tense moment, Connor stirred, groaning. Maya stood in the center of the ring, her hand raised by the referee. "Your winner by knockout, Maya Brennan." The crowd's roar was deafening. People who'd never spoken to her were on their feet applauding. Even some of Connor's teammates were clapping, recognizing the skill they'd witnessed. Victoria's face was white with rage and humiliation. She turned to leave, but Maya's voice, amplified by the microphone the announcer had handed her, stopped her. "Victoria," Maya said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd, "you made me a promise." Victoria turned, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. "I don't owe you anything, you fucking psycho, ow." "You do," Maya interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "You owe me and everyone else an apology, or would you prefer I share the videos from the parking lot? The ones where you and your friends assaulted me, tore my clothes. I believe that's called battery. Maybe sexual assault given the nature of it. I'm sure the police would be interested. I'm sure colleges would be interested when those videos surfaced during application season." The crowd murmured, phones coming out, people searching for videos they might have missed. Maya knew they were out there. She'd made sure to save copies, had her father send them to a lawyer friend for safekeeping. Richard Sinclair stood up in the VIP section, his face dark with fury, but not at Maya. He was staring at his daughter with an expression of dawning horror, perhaps finally understanding what kind of person he'd raised. "Apologize," Connor said suddenly from where he sat on a stool in the corner, an ice pack pressed to his jaw. His words were slurred but clear. "Jesus, Vic, just apologize. She could have hurt me bad, but she didn't. She could have choked me out in the first round. She let me go. Just apologize." Madison and Ashley had already distanced themselves, standing at the edge of the crowd, trying to become invisible. They understood which way the wind was blowing. Victoria looked around wildly, seeing her kingdom crumble in real time. Her followers would see this. The whole town was watching. With tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face, she grabbed the microphone from the announcer. "I'm sorry," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm sorry for bullying you." "And," Maya prompted, "and others." "I'm sorry for bullying others." "Who specifically?" Victoria's face contorted. "Emily Patterson, Marcus Webb, Jennifer Liu, others." "I'm sorry." Maya nodded and took the microphone back. "That's a start," she said. "But apologies are just words. Actions matter more. From now on, the harassment stops. The gossip page gets deleted. The targeting of kids who don't fit your narrow definition of acceptable ends. And if I hear about you reverting to your old ways, those videos go public. Understood?" Victoria nodded, her face burning with humiliation. Maya handed the microphone back and started to leave the ring. Then she paused, turning back to address the crowd one more time. "I'm not a victim," she said, her voice strong and clear. "None of us are victims unless we choose to be. I'm a farmer, I work hard, I get dirty, I feed people, and I'm proud of that. If you have a problem with it, you know where to find me. I'll be in the fields, doing honest work, like my family has done for generations." She climbed down from the ring and walked straight to her father, who wrapped her in a fierce hug. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered, and Maya felt tears finally come. Not from pain or humiliation, but from release. Marcus, Luis, and Hannah surrounded them, all talking at once about her performance, but Maya barely heard them. She was watching the crowd, seeing the faces of kids who'd been tormented, seeing hope in their eyes for the first time. Emily Patterson was there, the girl who'd attempted suicide after Victoria's campaign against her. She was crying, mouthing "thank you" over and over. Marcus Webb, the boy who'd been outed before he was ready, stood with his parents who'd driven from 2 towns over to watch. He was smiling for the first time in months. The next Monday at school was surreal. Maya walked through halls that seemed completely different, though nothing physical had changed. The gossip page was gone, deleted along with all its archived cruelty. Victoria walked with her head down, her empire in ruins. Madison and Ashley had transferred to private school, their parents apparently deciding Cedar Ridge High had become inappropriate. Connor was there, his face still showing the marks of the fight. He approached Maya at her locker, limping slightly. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "Not because I have to, because I should have a long time ago. What we did to you was wrong. What I did was wrong." Maya studied him for a moment. "Apology accepted," she said. "But like I said, actions matter more than words." Connor nodded. "I know. I quit the team, going to focus on academics. Maybe try to be a better person." He walked away, and Maya noticed he no longer moved with the swagger that had defined him. She wasn't sure if that was good or bad, but it was certainly different. At lunch, Maya sat at her usual table, but she wasn't alone. Emily Patterson sat across from her, along with Marcus Webb and a few other kids who'd been outcasts. They didn't talk much, but there was comfort in the companionship. "You changed everything," Emily said quietly. "You know that, right?" Maya shook her head. "I just stood up for myself. Anyone could have done it." "But you did," Marcus said. "That makes all the difference." Life continued its rhythm. Maya still woke before dawn for chores, still trained in the evenings, though now Hannah came by twice a week to work with her, talking about potentially competing professionally after graduation. Still maintained her grades, with several colleges now actively recruiting her, some for academics, some for athletics. The farm prospered in small ways. A few people started buying eggs and produce directly from them, wanting to support the fighter's family. The pregnant mare delivered safely, twin foals that Maya named Hope and Justice. Robert smiled more, the ghost of Sarah seeming less heavy on his shoulders. Victoria's father pulled her from Cedar Ridge High, sending her to a boarding school on the East Coast. The Sinclair Development Group quietly withdrew several proposed projects, Richard apparently deciding Cedar Ridge wasn't the right fit for his vision anymore. The town didn't mourn the loss. Winter arrived in earnest, blanketing the fields in snow. Maya stood in the barn one evening, watching the snow fall through the open door. The championship belt hung on the wall, but she rarely looked at it. That wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the peace she'd found, not just from others, but within herself. She'd spent so long hiding, so long being ashamed of who she was. Now she walked with her head high, unashamed of the dirt under her fingernails, the calluses on her hands, the strength in her body. A truck pulled up the driveway, and she recognized Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, getting out with her teenage son, Tommy. He was small for his age, wore thick glasses, and had the hunched posture of someone trying to become invisible. "Maya," Mrs. Patterson said, "I hope you don't mind us dropping by. Tommy's been having some trouble at school, some older boys." She trailed off, but Maya understood. Tommy looked at her with a mixture of awe and hope. Could you teach me? Not to hurt anyone, just to not be afraid anymore." Maya looked at her father, who had appeared in the barn doorway. He nodded slightly. "Training starts at 5 a.m., Maya said. "Be here at 4:45. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty." Tommy's face lit up. "I'll be here. Thank you. Thank you so much." As they drove away, Robert put his hand on Maya's shoulder. "You know others will come. Word will spread." Maya nodded. "Maybe that's not a bad thing. Marcus always said I had good teaching instincts." "Your mother was a healer," Robert said quietly. "She helped people in one way. Maybe this is your way." That night, Maya cleaned out a section of the barn, setting up a proper training space. She hung the heavy bag in a better spot, laid out the mats more efficiently, organized the equipment they'd accumulated. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. Over the following weeks, more kids started showing up. Not many, maybe a dozen regulars, but enough. Kids who'd been bullied, kids who were different, kids who just wanted to feel strong. Maya taught them what she knew. Not just the techniques, but the discipline, the respect, the understanding that strength wasn't about domination, but about protection. She taught them the way her father had taught her, the way Marcus and Luis and Hannah had refined. But she also taught them something else, that there was honor in hard work, dignity in getting dirty, pride in feeding people. Several of the kids started helping with farm chores, learning that physical labor could be meditation, that there was peace in routine and purpose. Spring came early that year, the snow melting into mud that would become new growth. Maya stood in the same spot she'd stood that autumn day that now seemed like a lifetime ago, watching the sun rise over fields that would soon be planted with corn and soybeans and hope. She was 18 now, graduation approaching, college decisions to make. Hannah had connected her with a professional training camp that wanted to sponsor her. Several universities had offered full scholarships. The world was opening up in ways she'd never imagined, but for now, she was content to be where she was. On the farm that had shaped her, surrounded by the kids she was helping to shape, doing the work that mattered. She'd learned that strength came in many forms, that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it, that sometimes the greatest victory was simply refusing to be broken. The town had changed too, in subtle but important ways. The rigid social hierarchies remained, but had softened, become more permeable. Kids who would have been outcasts found tribes. Parents who'd turned blind eyes started paying attention. Teachers who'd been silent started speaking up. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was better, and better was a start. Maya heard trucks pulling up, her students arriving for morning training. Tommy was first, as always, eager and determined. Behind him came Emily, still fragile but growing stronger, Marcus Webb, who'd found confidence along with muscle. Others, each with their own story, their own struggles, their own strength, waiting to be discovered. "Ready to work?" Maya called out. They answered in unison, their voices strong. "Ready?" She smiled, remembering her father's words from long ago. Strength isn't about showing off. It's about being ready when readiness matters. She was ready. They were ready. And somewhere, she thought, her mother was watching and smiling, proud not of the fighter her daughter had become, but of the teacher, the protector, the person who stood up not just for herself, but for others. The sun climbed higher, painting the world gold, and Maya led her students into the barn to begin the day's training. Outside, the farm continued its eternal rhythm, animals calling for breakfast, wind through the corn, the distant sound of tractors already at work. It was a good life, an honest life, a life worth fighting for, and Maya Brennan, farm girl, fighter, teacher, and survivor, was exactly where she belonged.